We continue now at the top of Daf Pei Aleph Amid Beis Mesechet Sanhedrin. This is Sanhedrin Daf 81b. On the previous summit, Rabbi Yossi said in the Mishnah, let's say you have a situation where a person commits an Aveira, and that Aveira is liable to two different death penalties. So Rabbi Yossi said that the person is going to get the death penalty of the relationship that was first. And the example is, let's say, for example, a person has relations with a woman, and that woman was at first his mother-in-law, and then that woman also became an Eshes Ish, a married woman. So since she was first his mother-in-law, the punishment he's going to get is the death penalty that applies by his mother-in-law, not the one that applies by Eshes Ish. That was the example of Rabbi Yossi. And on the previous summit, Rav Ada bar Ava asked Rav the following question. He said, when you have a situation that a woman is a mother-in-law first and then becomes an Eshes Ish, that's what's called an Isser Mosif. Isser Mosif means that there was something that was added in that second status. When she became a married woman, now suddenly she's usher to everyone. Before she was his mother-in-law, she was only usher to her son-in-law. Now she becomes a married woman, she's usher to everyone. And by Isser Mosif, we say Isser Chal al Isser. We say that one prohibition is Chal on the other prohibition, and that second prohibition does apply. And so therefore we should say that the second death penalty would apply as well. And now the Gemara has the response of Rava Amar Lei said to him, Ada Bari, Ada my son, betray Katli Kataltli. Well, what are you going to do? You're going to give him two death penalties? That wouldn't make any sense. And therefore when it comes to doing it on purpose, even though we say Isser Chal al Isser Chal al Isser means, let's say it was two mistakes. So then you could bring two karbonos. But if you're going to say Isser Chal al Isser by the death penalty, you're not going to give a person two death penalties. That would not make any sense. Rashi explains, Amar Le Ada Bari betray Katli Kataltale. Ada my son, are you going to kill him with two death penalties? Bitzmiya, this is being asked like a question. Of course not. Emes shecholu shtei and all. If it's true that both averas, they both are chal, v'avera sheyesh ba shtei misosu, and this is in fact an avera with two death penalties, nidon bechamura, where again a person is judged by the stricter of them. V'heichata baladuno af beishasish, but over here, how are you going to also judge him with the avera veishasish? V'chisargenu shtei pa'amim, are you going to kill him two times? V'chichayil eishasish achamos, are you going to say that eishasish is now going to be chal also on the prohibition of mother-in-law, Rabbi Yossi? When do we say that Eshes Ish is chal on top of the prohibition of mother-in-law? Rabbi Yossi, according to Rabbi Yossi, L'inyan shogegu, that's again if it was done by mistake, or l'schayev shtei chatos, in order to be liable to two carbon chatases. But again, we're not going to apply that by a death penalty. And we will note over here that Rashi specifically seems to be pointing out that when it comes to relations with one's mother-in-law, the punishment is stoning. When it comes to a relationship with a married woman, the punishment is more lenient. The punishment is strangulation. And so therefore Rashi is effectively saying, in a situation where the woman was first his mother-in-law, which is punished by stoning, and then she became a married woman, which is punished by chenek, by strangulation. So there, even if we were to say that both averos were chal, you're not going to give the lighter of the two punishments, strangulation. That wouldn't make any sense. So you have to give the stoning, and of course, once you're giving the stoning, you can't give someone two death penalties. And that's why in this particular case, again, when you're talking about a situation of a death penalty, and you're talking specifically about a situation where the woman was first the mother-in-law and then a married woman, you're going to end up giving the stricter of the two. You'll end up giving that first relationship the punishment of stoning and not the punishment of strangulation. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Misha Loka Vishana. Let's say a person does an Avera which is supposed to get Malchus, and then he repeats that Avera, he does it twice. Bezdin Machnisan Oso Lakipa. So at that point in time, the court brings him into a vaulted chamber, Umachilan Oso Saoran, and they feed him barley, Ad Shakreso Misbakas, until his stomach bursts. Rashi explains, Misha Loka Vishana, Shaloka Shtei Pa'amim means he got lashes twice, Al Shtei Averas for two Averas, as the Gemara will now explain. The Gemara says, Mishum de Loka Vishana, just because he got Malchus twice, Bezdin Konsan Oso Lakipa, Bezdin brings him into a vaulted chamber to die. Why should that be the punishment for such a situation? And the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Yirmiyah says that Reish Lakish says, Hacha b'malkios shel krisas askinon. Here we're talking not by any situation of Malchus. We're talking specifically about lashes that's given in a situation of kares. As Rashi explains, shel krisas lav sheyesh bo kares. You have a negative commandment where the punishment is kares. Vehisru bo Malchus, and they warned him that he's going to get lashes, in which case he does get lashes, but the fundamental punishment over here is kares. And therefore, the Gavra bar Ketalahu, really he is a person who's supposed to be killed. As Rashi says, Bidei Shamayim Yichrasu. This is a person who's supposed to be killed. Bidei Shamayim, that's the nature of kares. Ukruvehu delo mikrav katle. And Rashi explains, Ukruvehu delo mikrav katle adayin lo niskarva misaso. His death has not yet come close. V'kevan de kam mevater lo nafshi. Now since he's already been been mevater on his soul. He doesn't seem to care. He just keeps doing averos. Therefore, mikarvinan le liktale lavi. Therefore, we bring him close to death because of this. As Rashi says, the mevater nafshi the mafkir atzmo averos. He's giving himself up to do these kinds of averos, which again are liable technically to a kind of a death penalty because it's kares. So that's why we put him in this vaulted chamber in order to die. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rabbi Yaakov, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa. Rabbi Yaakov said to Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Tachlifa, Ta azbar Allah, come and I'll explain to you, B'malkios shel kares achas. We're talking over here of malchus of one kares. Aval shel shtayim v'shel shalosh krisos. Let's say it's 2 or 3 different averos that carry the punishment of kares, so that's different. Then he's surehu de katoim, then already he's just trying to taste different kinds of prohibitions. You can't add one to the other and say he's like a repeat offender, even though it's all liable to kares, but it's different averos. V'lo mevater kulihai, he's not really giving himself up to doing averos so much, he's trying to taste different kinds of averos, and so there we would not put him into the kippah, we would not put him into the vaulted chamber to die. Rashi explains shel kares achas of one kares, meaning sha'avar osa avera atzma shalosh pam. He did one avera, he transgressed it 3 times. Alashtayim loko v'shlishas yichansu l'chipah. Again, the first 2 times you give him malchus, the 3rd time you bring him into the vaulted chamber. But again, if it's going to be different kinds of averas, this would not apply. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Mishalok of Ashana, again, somebody got malchus twice, so then we're going to bring him into the vaulted chamber. And the Gemara says, Shana afagav de lo shilish. It sounds like he does it twice, not 3 times. Lema masnisan de lo Rav Shimon Gamliel. Let us say that the Mishnah is not following Rav Shimon Gamliel. There's a machlokus between Rebbe and Rav Shimon Gamliel, whether a chazak is established after 2 times or 3 times. It sounds like our Mishnah is establishing a chazak after 2 times. To Rav Shimon Gamliel, because if it was Rav Shimon Gamliel, ha'amar tulas zimne lo have a chazaka. He says until 3 times it's not a chazaka. You need 3 times for a chazaka. Again, our Mishnah seems to be saying 2 times creates a chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Amar Ravina says, Afilu Taim Rav Shimon Gamliel. You could even say our Mishnah is Rav Shimon Gamliel, kasavar averos machzikos, because our Mishnah holds that it's not the number of lashes, it's the number of transgressions. It's the number of averos that the person commits that makes the chazaka. And so in this case, what actually happened is the person did the avera 2 times, got lashes 2 times, and then he did the avera a 3rd time. He didn't get lashes the 3rd time because he's going to be put into the vaulted chamber after the 3rd time, but there were 3 transgressions that were committed, and it's actually 3 times that's being discussed in our Mishnah. And the Gemara continues, Meisvei, we have a question from the following brisa. Avar avera sheyesh ba malchus pam rishona ushnia malkinoso. If a person transgresses an avera where the punishment is malchus, so the 1st and 2nd time we give him lashes, ushlishas, and then the 3rd time konsenoso lakipa, we bring him into the vaulted chamber, and so that's clearly talking about 3 times doing the avera and 2 times getting malchus. And then the brisa says, Abashol Omer, Abashol says, Af b'shlishas, even that 3rd time malkinoso, we're going to give him lashes, meaning to say we're going to give him a 3rd set of malchus, and then baravias, and then if he transgresses a 4th time, konsenoso lakipa, so then we bring him into the vaulted chamber. And so how do we explain this machlokas tanoim in the brisa? My love, is it not? The kulialma malkios machzikos, that everybody agrees that we're actually following the malchus over here, the number of times of malchus is creating the chazaka. Uveplugsa de Rebbe Rav Shimon Gamliel kamiflagi, and the machlokas actually is the machlokas between Rebbe and Rav Shimon Gamliel, whether a chazaka is established after 2 times, or whether a chazak is established after 3 times. And the Tanakam is saying, Rishon Ushniya Malkin, also the 1st and 2nd time, we're going to give Malchus, and we're following the Malchus. It goes by 2 times. And according to Abashol, we're following the Malchus. It goes by 3 times, because 3 times is a chazaka. But again, that would prove that when we're talking about Rishona Vishniya, that we actually are following Rebbe over there. We're not following Rav Shimon Gamliel. We're following the opinion of Rebbe that 2 times is a chazaka. And the Gemara says, Lo no, Dekuli Alma Yislu Rav Shimon Gamliel. It actually could be in this brisa as well. All opinions agree with Rav Shimon Gamliel that 3 times is a chazaka. And maybe the machlokas in this brisa is in the following: the Mar Savar Averos Machzikos, that the Tanakama holds that we follow the number of Averos. So you have 2 lashes, but you have 3 Averos, and therefore 3 is a chazak in terms of Averos, and so Konseno Solikipa. Umar Savar, and then the other one holds in the brisa, that's Abashol, that Malkios Machzikos, that we're not following the number of Averos, we're following the number of Malchus, and so therefore it's Beshlishis. You have 3 times Malchus, that establishes the Chazaka. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, but what about that which we learned in the following brisa? Hisru bo v'shasak. It says, let's say they warned the person and he was silent, and then hisru bo v'hirchen rosho. They warned him again, and then he nodded his head. And the point over here is he didn't actually have a full acceptance of the hasra. He didn't accept upon himself the malchus, but he was warned and he acknowledged that warning. So pam rishono shniya masrin bo. The first and second times we have this warning, and shlish is konsen osolakip. And then the third time we bring him into the vaulted chamber. And Abba Shaul says, af v'shlishis, even the third time, masrin bo, we give him this warning, and baravias, and then the fourth time, konsen osolakip, we bring him into the vaulted chamber. And the point is, from this brisa, is there is no malchus at all in this situation, because the way that he accepted the warning was accepting the warning, but not accepting getting malchus, and there was no malchus. It's just a question of how many times he did the avera. And so the Gemara says, v'hasam malchus lek, over there is no malchus. So b'mai kamiflagi, so what's the machlokas over here between the Tanakama and Abba Shaul? And Rashi explains, Hisru bo v'shasak, again they warned him and he was silent. Shehera be'atzmo kemekabel hasra, he showed that he was accepting the warning. Umiu lo hitter atzmo l'malchus, but he didn't permit himself, so to speak, to get the punishment of malchus, behedya explicitly. V'chein b'hirchen rosho v'ramaz shu be'mekabel, the same thing is true when he nodded his head and gave that hint that he was accepting it. Afal pita lo loki b'hasros, even though in these cases he's not given malchus with these warnings, kihani de lo hitter atzmo l'malchus, because again, he didn't permit himself, so to speak, to get malchus. Mikol makam hasros ninu, nevertheless, these are considered warnings. La'achziko rasha, to say that he's a wicked person. Upam rishona masrin bo v'shavkinan le v'chein ba'avera shniya v'shavkinan le. We warn him the first time and we let him go. We warn him the second time, we let him go. Uv'shlishas masrin be lamalkas, and then the third time they warn him that he's going to get lashes. V'konsin oso l'kipa ola, and then they do say that he has to go to the vaulted chamber over that. Sharei hochzak rasha b'shalosh averos shel hasros malkas, because here he became an avera with these three transgressions. And Abba Shaul says, again, Abba Shaul is saying that in this situation we actually go a fourth time. V'hacha malchus leka. Now over here, you can't say it's because of malchus. To lo hitter atzmo malchus. Again, he didn't permit himself for malchus. Sharei shasa, because he was quiet. To name a time of Abba Shaul mishum the malchus machzikos. Because then you could have said that Abba Shaul's reason is that you have to have three sets of malchus. V'lo huchzak atshe yilka, and he's not going to get the chazak until he gets malchus three times. Became a delok ala shlishas lo ayale laki. But that's what you could have said. But you can't say that in Abba Shaul here because he hasn't gotten malchus three times. So b'mai kamiflagi. So again, what are you going to say is the machlokas tanoim here? V'halola Ravina Mosav. Now Rashi notes this is not a question specifically on Ravina. T'haladidon nami kasha. This is a question in general. To be plugsa the Rebbe Rav Shimon Gamliel lo matzino l'ukman. You can't say that this brisa is a machlokas Rebbe and Rav Shimon Gamliel either in terms of the number of times that creates a chazaka. That you can't say dal karcha averos machzikos svirlu, because there is no multiple malchus here. It's got to be because of the avera that's creating the chazaka. To ein kan malchus. Again, there's no malchus. V'amai boy Abba Shaul Ravia. So we're still at the same question. Why would Abba Shaul say you need four? Because the machlokas only is whether it's two or three times that is a chazaka. And the Gemara continues and answers. Amar Ravina says, "Bekipa tzricha hasra kamiflagi." The machlokas actually over here is whether being put in the vaulted chamber does that step require its own hasra or not. That's the machlokas. And Rashi explains. Amar Ravina says, "Bein hacha bein b'masnis and kamaisa." Whether we're talking about over here, whether we're talking about in the first brisa, bekipa tzricha hasra kamiflagi. The machlokas actually is whether going in the vaulted chamber needs a warning. And everybody agrees with Rav Shimon Gamliel. V'lo huchzak ad shalosh averos shel hasros malchus mekubalos. The chazaka only happens after three transgressions that involve a warning that has to do with malchus, and he has to accept that warning. O bepivo b'shasiko o b'archanas rosh, and he can accept the warning with his mouth. He can accept it with silence. He can accept it by nodding, and it's not dependent on the number of punishments of malchus. It's dependent on the number of averos. So what are they arguing about? V'kamiflagi bekipa itzrich hasra. The whole machlokas is whether that last step of going in the vaulted chamber needs its own hasra. Tanakama Savar, the Tanakama holds kevan shehuchzuk rasha al shalosh hasros shal malchus. Once he's considered wicked over three warnings that are in reference to malchus, konsen oso lekipa. So then we put him into the vaulted chamber after three. V'aval bishalo husra al kach, even though he wasn't specifically warned about the vaulted chamber. V'Abba Shaul Savar, but Abba Shaul holds al gimel hasros shal malchus huchzuk rasha. After three warnings of malchus, he's a rasha. V'lo al ashtayim, and not on two. Umehashta b'inan avera revius. But now we need a fourth avera lahasros bo, to warn him im tavor tikanis lekipa, that we have to tell him that if he transgresses now, he's going to go into the kippah, he'll go into the vaulted chamber. That's actually the machlokus over here. And the Gemara continues, Umay Kipa. Now, what exactly is the nature of this vaulted chamber? Amar Rav Yehuda says, Mole Komaso. It's a small chamber that's just enough that fits his height. And the Gemara continues, Vehecha Remiza. And where exactly is this idea of the vaulted chamber hinted to? Rashi explains, Vehecha Remiza, Vadai halacha l'Moshe misinai hi. It certainly is a halacha l'Moshe misinai, hach onesh tekipa, this punishment of being in the vaulted chamber. Umiu hecha Remiza mixas. But nevertheless, where is there some hint to this idea? And the Gemara continues and says, it comes from the following pasuk. Amar Reish Lakish says, the pasuk says, Tamoses Rosh Ra. This is a pasuk in Tehillim. It says, Tamoses Rosh Ra v'sonei tzadik yashamu. It talks about the death of the wicked by evil. And Rashi explains, Tamoses Rosh Ra, misha huchzak Rasha temisaso ra'asa. What it means to say is that a person who's huchzak as a Rasha, a person who has a status, a presumption of being wicked, so then his death is going to be his evil. Alma muchzak Rasha bar misu. So you see that a person who's muchzik to be a Rasha, he's bar misa, he's somebody who's supposed to get death, and that's where we see this hint to this idea of putting him in the keep, of putting him into the vaulted chamber. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Reish Lakish, and Reish Lakish says, what does it mean when it's written in the pasuk, Ki gam lo yada ha'adam es ito, a person doesn't know his time, Kedogim shenechazim b'mitzuda ra, like fish that are trapped in an evil snare. My mitzuda ra, what is that referring to, mitzuda ra? Amar Reish Lakish says, chika, it's referring to the hook that a fish is trapped in. Rashi explains, "B'mitzuda ra, aidi da'ayri hacha Reish Lakish b'hai cross." Since Reish Lakish was dealing with this pasuk before, ma'isinan le'idach drasha de Reish Lakish. So we bring this other drasha of Reish Lakish with regards to this pasuk of mitzuda ra. My mitzuda ra chika. What does it mean? It means the hook. Shura v'cholosh v'katan. What it means to say is it's bad, but it's very small. V'oches bo dagim gedolim pisam. But yet it's able to grab these large fish suddenly. Ve'eno ro, I can't see it. Ve'eno dome lenechas berishtos al yedei ma'ariv v'tachbulus. It's not similar to a person being trapped or to an animal being trapped in a conventional kind of trap. That's what it means over here when it talks about a mitzuda ra. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hahoreg nefesh shelo be'edim. Let's say a person kills somebody, but there are no witnesses. Machnisin oso lekipa, so then you can't give him the death penalty. Instead, you bring him into this vaulted chamber. Machilin oso lechem tsaru ma'im lachatz. You give him small amounts of bread and water, and again, eventually he'll die in this chamber. And the Gemara says, Mino Yadinan, from where we know that he killed if there are no witnesses. Amar Rav says, Be'edus miyuchedes. We're talking here about edus miyuchedes. What that means is that you have two witnesses, but they see from different vantage points. You're not able to combine those witnesses for the death penalty, but again, you could use that testimony to put him into the vaulted chamber. Ushmuel Amar and Shmuel says, Shelo b'hasra. We're talking about a situation where there were witnesses, but there was no warning, so he can't be given the death penalty. Rav Chisda Amar Avimai, and Rav Chisda says that Avimai says, Kagon the case over here is they contradicted one another when it came to certain questions that were not the fundamental questions of the time and place, like the chakiros. There's a contradiction only within the bedikos. Kedetnan, as we learned in a Mishnah, Maisu Badak Ben Zakai bu'ukse ta'enim. There was an incident where Ben Zakai, he asked questions that had to do with the stems of the figs, the contradiction in small details with regards to the murder in terms of what was found by the actual place of the murder, the stems of the figs. And so that's a contradiction in bedikos, which again, we're not going to give a person a death penalty, but still we do have enough testimony to put him into the vaulted chamber. And the Gemara said, and the Gemara continues at the two dots, the Mishnah said, we give him a little bread and a little water. And so the Gemara says, what's the difference that here in this Mishnah, it says that in the vaulted chamber you give him a little bread and water, and why over there does it say, it says that we give him barley until his stomach bursts. So which one is it? Do we give him barley? Do we give him bread and water? And the Gemara continues and answers, Amar Rav Sheshes says, Idi v'idi nosnim lo, we actually give him both. Lechem tsaru ma'im lachatz at sheyuktan mayana, we give him a little bread, a little water, and that causes his intestines to get smaller. V'hadar ma'chilano so soren, and then we give him barley at shekreso mesbakas, and that causes his stomach to burst. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Hagone vesakasva, somebody who steals the kasva, which the Gemara will explain what that is. V'hamekalel bekosim, and somebody who curses with sorcery, the Gemara will explain that as well. V'haboel aramis, and somebody who has relations with an aramis, with a non-Jewish woman. Kanoim pogenbo, in all of these cases, the kanoim, they're able to exact punishment from this person. Rashi says aramis is bas ovet kochavim, it's the daughter of a non-Jew, of an idol worshiper. Kanoim pogenbo means b'nei Those people who are good people who want to take the retribution of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into their hands. So at that moment when they see the Aveira, they're allowed to exact punishment from this person. But after that, you can't kill him. That death penalty is not given to court. Who this idea of kanoin pogen bo is halacha l'Moshe Misinai, and Rashi says pogen is memisin. Pogen means these kanoim, they're allowed to kill him. And the Mishnah continues, Kohen sheshimesh betuma. Let's say you have a Kohen, he serves in the Beis HaMikdash, and he's impure. Ein echav ha-kohanim mevi'in oso lebezin. His brethren, the Kohanim, they don't bring him to court. Ela pir chekuna motzian oso chutz la'azara. Rather, the young people of the Kahuna, the young Kohanim, they bring him outside of the Azara. Umafzian es mocho b'gezerin, and they pierce his skull with pieces of wood. And the Mishnah continues, Zor sheshimesh b'mikdash. If you have a non-Kohen who serves in the Beis HaMikdash, Rabbi Akiva says the punishment is chenek, strangulation. And the Chachamim say that the punishment is in the hands of heaven. And the Gemara says, my kasva, what is the Mishnah talking about when it says he steals the kasva? Amar Rav Yehuda says, klishares, it's referring to klishares, vessels that are used to serve in the Beis HaMikdash. V'chein hu omer, and likewise it says in the pasuk, v'es ksos hanosach, it talks about the ksos hanosach, which is talking about the vessels that hold the libations. Those are vessels, klishares. That's what we're talking about here in the Mishnah. And the Gemara says, v'heichor remizan, where is this hinted to? It says in the pasuk, v'lo yavo liros kevales hakodesh v'mesu. It says they shouldn't see kevales hakodesh. That refers to stealing. As Rashi here explains, v'heichor remizan, first the shaycha b'misa. Where do we see that there's death penalty relevant to stealing the klishares? Kevales hakodesh. It says kevales hakodesh lashon ganav. That's a language of stealing. Shemavliin umachbiin. Bala means to swallow. Literally, that's like you're hiding something. You're swallowing it. You're hiding it. And so therefore that's a reference again to Vamesu. That's a reference to the fact that death applies in such a situation. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, V'hamekalel bekosim, one who curses with sorcery, is also kanoin pogen bo. And the Gemara says, Tani Rav Yosef taught, Yake kosim es kosmo. What does it mean, mekalel bekosim? It means the person says this, that the sorcerer should strike his sorcerer. We'll see Rashi in a moment. And Rabbanan v'tem Rabba bar Mori Amri, the Rabbanan and some say Rabba bar Mori say, Yakeyu kosim lo ulakono ulamakno, that the sorcerer should strike him and his creator and his provider. And Rashi explains, Yake kosem es kosmo, shemekalel klape mala. What this means is that he's cursing towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, bekosem with his sorcery. He says as follows, Yake hakosem zeh es kosmo. This sorcerer, meaning talking about himself, he is going to strike his sorcerer. He's going to strike the one who provides him with this power, meaning HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Hainu klape mala, that's towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shenosen ksamim ha'elu believe what's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who gave this person the ability to say this sorcery. We'll take a look at the text of the Mesoros Hashas. V'kachashivle, it should be v'kachashivle. And Rashi continues, v'kachashivle hai kosem be'enov shehu yireh v'yesh b'koach l'kalol bo. The point is that this particular kosem, this sorcerer, he considers himself in his eyes that he also has the power of a god, and he has the ability, he has the strength to be able to curse him. And Rashi continues, Yakeyu kosem. The second explanation is that the sorcerer is cursing lo to him, which Rashi says means mekalel es chaveru. He's actually cursing his friend, V'yomer, and he's saying, Yakeyu hakosem hazeh, this sorcerer should strike him, lo ulakono ulamakno, to him, and to his creator, and to his provider. Dahainu klape mal, again, this is a situation where he's cursing towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, towards the one above, Shu kones olam, who acquires the world, who is the creator of the world, umakne libriosav estuvo, and also is the one that provides goodness to his creations. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, V'haboel aram is somebody who has relations with a non-Jewish girl. Also, that's kanoin pogen bo. And the Gemara says, Boi minei Rav Kahana me Rav. Rav Kahana asked Rav the following question, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Beis Amud Aleph.